So hello everyone from wherever you're joining us today. My name is Dan Scarborough. I'm the publisher of the Digital Infra Network, and we are focused as a media business on helping organizations transition towards zero carbon digital infrastructure. I'm excited to be here on Earth Day, and Evolve Strategic Communications have invited me to moderate this panel on sustainability in the age of digital acceleration. And we're joined by an accolade of people with very good backgrounds and hopefully good opinions on this subject. First of all, I've got David McCall, who's the VP of Innovation at QTS Data Centers. I've got Peter Hannaford, who is a senior partner at Portman Partners, the specialist recruitment firm working in digital infrastructure. We've got Michael Morris, who's the SVP of Design and Construction at Aligned Data Centers. Elliot Gillespie, sorry Elliot, a bit of a tongue twister there, who's the Vice President of Operations at Bluebird Networks. And last but by no means least, we have Richard Green, who is a managing partner for Liquid Technology. So thank you guys for joining us today.
You're very welcome, Daniel.
So we've got about 45 minutes that we're going to try and get to the bottom of this subject, and then we've got time for Q&A at the end. And clearly this is a very topical matter at the moment. So, you know, I know for most people around the world, the last year has been dominated by COVID and lockdown and Zoom calls if you're in the tech space or any other space. And data centers and digital infrastructure have done their bit to help keep the economy moving. But you know, with COP22 coming and climate change kind of on the horizon, this is certainly a key issue. So environmental sustainability has become a business imperative, and data centers are, you know, clearly one of the larger energy consuming industries. So what responsibility do we have as a sector towards sustainability right now, and what can we do about it? So maybe we'll kick off with Peter. Peter, if you could give us your thoughts, and then we'll run quickly through the other panelists.
Sure, Dan. I mean, well, as you say, Earth Day, and I'm afraid I have to confess that until fairly recently, I wasn't aware of this. So I'm going to hold my hand up, and I'm committing the heinous crime of not being aware of Earth Day, which was apparently started 51 years ago. The first Earth Day I discovered was 51 years ago, organized by a US senator from Wisconsin and a student called Dennis Hayes, who had been appalled by the impact of a big oil spill in California in 1969 and just wanted to challenge the energy of the student anti-war movement into, you know, to be able to protect the environment. And the reason I mention this is because a lot of people are talking about the fact that you know, Generation Z or Generation Z, to our US people there, are probably more aware of the environment and sustainability than old guys like me. But if you go back 51 years, those people that were on that march I guess are the same age as me now. I mean, they're kind of 70 years old, and it just makes you wonder what happened to all that, you know, that enthusiasm for climate change. Where did it go, and where is it going?
It's been a long time coming, certainly, but thank you for that insight, Peter, and for kind of setting the scene, so to speak. I'm going to hand over to Dave McCall, who's the VP of Innovation for QTS, and get Dave's take on this very important subject. I know you talk to a lot of people, Dave. Maybe you can give us a couple of minutes of insight.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for hosting the event and for allowing me to attend. When I saw some of the names on the panel, I thought, what's my role? Oh, I see, I'm the comedian, because we got a lot of smart people on here. You know, in my podcast and in my role at QTS, we talk to everybody from filmmakers to data center builders and operators, esports, you name it, people that are around the internet community, use it, make data, move data, protect data, hire people that do that, whatever. everybody's talking about it, and they're not talking about it maybe in a way that 50 years ago when you were rallying people to this movement, that it was the anti-war people that had to join, or that were looking for a cause. I mean, this is everybody from across the liberal or the political spectrum, liberal, conservative here in the States, however the people want to label themselves. And maybe for different reasons. For example, I know folks that want to become energy independent through solar, if at all possible, so they can get off the grid, not for the reasons that I might want to, or my organization might want to, but they just want energy independence. So it's less about climate change. It's more about how can I be sustainable for myself. And then you have organizations like ours that, in addition to being good custodians of the resources entrusted to us, we want to be good for our shareholders. And so how do we build facilities that are extremely efficient, that are extremely reliable, that are cognizant of the resources that we're consuming, because it's a finite resource. And we also want independence and resiliency. And so for whatever reason, people are coming to the discussion, the whole world's coming to the discussion. And then lastly, the hyperscalers in particular. And the reason why I mention those is not so much that they're more passionate than enterprise customers or other people that we work with, but they're the world's largest buyers. And they've gone from, this is a discussion we'd like to have, to, if we don't have this discussion, we're not going to do business with whoever it is that they do business with. And so it's a fantastically chaotic time to be part of it, but it's a very important time. And I look forward to the discussion today.
Yeah, no, thanks a lot for that insight, Dave. Moving on, I think Michael Morris is the SVP of Design and Construction at Aligned, and I know, it's responsible for building some big projects. How are you seeing this, Michael, reflect in kind of your role from a design and construction perspective, representing that side of Aligned's business from a sustainability perspective? You're on mute, Michael.
Oh, can you hear me now? Sorry about that.
Yeah, no worries.
Yes, certainly. So the acceleration of this transformation has certainly been good for our business and for our growth, and definitely kept all of us busy. But kind of like, to me, when you think about Earth Day and what it means, it's also a good way to reflect back and actually see how far that we've come for some of the technologies and the innovations and the efficiencies that have been gained in a pretty rapid time. Certainly a long way to go and lots of work to do, but it's also good to look back and see what some of those influences we talked about 50 years ago. There has been some pretty significant gains in our industry. So super proud to be part of that, even part of some innovative technologies that are even pushing the industry farther from a efficiency and sustainability standpoint. But the transformation has been fun. It's led to a bunch of long weeks and long nights, but we couldn't be more excited to be a part of the journey.
Yeah. So in terms of let's come back to that in a minute. But so we've also got Elliot Gillespie, who sits on the ops side for Bluebird Networks. So Elliot, what's your thoughts on kind of how sustainability is transforming the way you operate your data centers?
Now, Bluebird Network has multiple data centers, so we play a big role in the sustainability initiative. With large energy usage, large power consumption, comes large responsibility. So integrating mixed use renewable energy sources from our utility companies, upgrading to energy efficient infrastructure, such as energy efficient uninterrupted power supplies, maybe some flywheel technology, cooling tower economizers, stuff like that is what we're really looking at doing. It's not just our investment committee that is looking at this, but our customers as well. We provide co-location space in our data centers, so customers are going to be, on this train with us. They're going to want to have sustainability initiatives within their company, and they're going to look for providers like Bluebird to assist them with the journey as well.
Yeah, it's interesting. So we're just going to have a quick catch up with our last panelist, and then we'll move on to some more questions. But Richard, you're at a slightly different side than a lot of the panelists in terms of liquid technology. And it's not just about the power consumption of the data center, it's about the IT equipment and the recycling and the circularity nature of the end-to-end from the application through to the utility. And we'll come back to that in a minute as well. But Richard, what's your take on kind of this sustainability transition that we're looking to go through over the next few years?
So, I mean, I think really for us, because it's kind of a core of what we do in terms of repurposing or recycling IT assets, sustainability again is core of that. What I've seen, I think, is more of an awareness from corporations about the need for sustainability, and then paying attention to who they're working with. So certifications along sustainability guidelines, I think, have become just more important when we're engaging with a company and they want to see what we're doing, and kind of educating them even more about how we're processing equipment and what we're doing with their data. But I do see sustainability. I've been happy, as I've been 20 years in business, that it's become something that people are actually looking for. Where when I first started in the business, people just didn't want to pay for their equipment to be removed, where now they realize that there's an environmental impact to what they're doing on the back end.
It's interesting. I mean, I know that, we're getting more and more organizations, hyperscalers, various different companies that are, and even countries, making commitments towards being zero carbon within a defined time period. So Microsoft, for instance, how realistic is that? And do we as a group of people feel like, it's achievable and on target? Maybe Dave, if you could give me your thoughts on that.
Absolutely, it's achievable. It just takes a willingness to achieve it. And the 5 largest buyers right now, certainly some of the largest buyers, are insisting that we do it. There was a report, I believe, published end of last year, and it showed that while data center usage workloads grew by 8%, internet traffic grew by 12%, energy consumption more or less by data centers almost stayed flat. And so how do we do that and with all those exploding workloads? It's because we got much more efficient in how we're managing our energy, how we're managing our workloads. What density are we striving for per rack? So from a physical environment perspective and consumption perspective, it's amazing. We thought that while data centers are, depending upon which report you look at, are 2 to 3% of the global energy consumption, for it to approximately remain flat is pretty remarkable. But the other thing that's been entering into that conversation is, but what else are you doing with water? How are you managing that? Richard was just talking about waste. It's now not just enough you have a waste and a recycling plan, but is it an e-waste plan? And who's your partner to make sure that as you're shredding and you're recycling through these things, that you're doing it in a sustainable way so that we don't impact the environment by dropping rare earth metals and material into the earth and impacting the environment that way. So it just feels like there's a lot of momentum, real sustainable momentum, and our shareholders and other people, not just our customers, are requiring that organizations like ours report on it, have measurable standards, we report on it, and we measure against it, and that they see traction. I think that's going to be not just the new norm, it's the norm now.
Yeah, I think it's, I was reading a piece more recently about hot carbon accounting and how that's going to be a very significant role into the future as how organizations report their move towards zero carbon. Are you seeing, Peter, from a people perspective, are you seeing, a lot more of this kind of sustainability in organizations, job functions across the board, and, a kind of the advent of the chief sustainability officer, if you like?
Um, Not enough, Dan, I'm afraid, at the moment, because we'd love to find people. We'd love to find these chief sustainability officers for companies. So not yet, and firms are looking at it in a slightly different way. I would have thought. Well, I think no, I would have thought. I do think it's imperative that somebody. There are so many things involved in this move to zero carbon, that you really do need somebody to, within a company, somebody to manage all the possibilities that exist. And it's not just, where you buy electricity from, it's in the whole supply chain as well. I mean, it's a big thing, this. And people haven't got their head around it yet. No, I mean, we do notice that more and more people do have chief sustainability officers, but I asked one of the biggest firms in our sector, do they have a chief sustainability officer? And the answer was no, because it's part of everybody's. They want sustainability to be embedded in the way that all their employees behave and think. Now that's all very nice, but you still need somebody. It's a bit like herding cats. You still need somebody, I think, to manage the whole thing. And unfortunately, no, we're not seeing enough of that at the moment, Dan. But we're pushing.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. It's certainly trying to tie everything together and make people responsible for this as an organization, and then kind of report against it. There's so many different things to cover and important areas that we need to cover. I'd like to just talk a bit about the grid and our responsibility with the grid, and because ultimately, lots of the organizations that are in this space are procuring renewable energy as a way to offset energy that they're consuming. And one of the theses that we've been working on is the fact that the relationship between the data center and the grid, from allowing the grid to improve, is quite an important step in the energy transformation at a grid level. Maybe if you could just give me your thoughts on that from an Align perspective, Michael, and how you're kind of working with a grid integration in some of your data centers, and what you see that looking like from a design perspective.
So I think you touched on an important point there in how our industry and its energy consumption is actually driving the development and sustainability of the renewable energy market. I think that's actually an understated point in how our industry is leading that type of innovation. So I think that is a really important piece. And I think from the grid standpoint, I think our industry is helping stabilize the grid, which is ultimately going to help distribute that renewable resources to a broader community. So kind of very much the more that we use, the more that we buy, the more that we can provide, and just help grow that industry and do it in a very natural and organic way.
Do you see more on-site kind of renewable on-site power generation, and kind of a change and kind of a relationship whereby you're supplying power back to the grid? Is that something that's common with your data centers, or that you're seeing common from a design construction perspective, or is that still in its infancy?
So we as Align do have it both ways, and we do have instances where we are and can be a generator back to the grid. And it does have its advantages. And so that is something, as we look to continue to improve our environmental stance, that's definitely something that's on the table, and we're looking at it with our utility providers across the portfolio.
So maybe if we can, Elliot, if we just jump to you for a perspective. So one of the other things that seems to be quite key here is the performance of the IT. And I know Dave kind of covered it a little bit earlier on in terms of the fact that energy consumption isn't going up. But are you seeing any metrics or any kind of, have you got any feedback on operational performance of the IT systems that you're running, and how effectively they're being utilized from a consumption perspective?
Yeah, well, over the last year with the pandemic happening, specifically for Bluebird, we've seen an increase in demand on connectivity, right? Everybody needs to be connected. They need additional bandwidth, additional internet. They need additional storage space in the data centers facilities. So we are seeing increased demand for IT and connectivity in the data centers. Supplying the electricity to those customers, trying to get that mixed use utility from the utility provider. We're looking at options where we can purchase renewable energy credits through the utility companies, giving us the opportunity to pass some of those benefits along to the customers. Because as this grows, the bandwidth demand grows over the next years. We're not going backwards. Once everybody has the connectivity and that additional bandwidth, they don't want to go backwards. And as we go into the remote work, era, as we are now, it's hard for people to go back to the offices and such. So I do see the demand increasing year over year, and power supply is increasing year over year. And if we can use some of those renewable energy credits and put some of that money back into the utility companies so they can develop more solar arrays or wind generators, I think that's the best way to go right now.
Okay, so Richard, from just following on from my question, from an IT perspective, in terms of the performance differential in hardware that you're seeing from your customers and their kind of refresh rate, is that refresh rate of the IT systems, is that helping us keep pace with the energy consumption from the industry? And do you see that continuing?
Oh, I think so. I mean, Intel and other companies are always building faster processors, but I think they tend to be also more efficient, generating less heat. So I definitely see that as a trend, and I think that will continue.
Because PUE, we come on to PUE and we look at kind of measurements and kind of how we're running and managing this transition and understanding it. Peter, is PUE a valid measurement tool for judging sustainability? What's your thoughts on that?
Well, Dan, you don't want to get me started on PUE, I don't think. The answer would be it was useful. It had its time. It was very useful, but it doesn't drive the right behavior, I think. So I think this is all about the problem. Well, we know what the problem is, but you don't want to tinker around the edges with this stuff. It is all about, I'm afraid, it's all about leadership. You'd expect me to say this, but this comes from the top. And it has to be, there's a couple of things that we work on, a couple of the pillars to what we specialize in. Obviously, leadership and data center is one. Diversity is another one that's big at the moment. And that is, I'll just touch on diversity for the moment, because what diversity is about is not just ticking boxes and saying, we have enough of these people and we've got, in this bracket, we can tick this, we can tick that. It isn't. It's about getting people on that have diverse backgrounds and think differently, because that's when you get innovation and you get improvements by people.
Improvement on PUE, I take it, Peter.
No, I know. I'm going to come back to that. But PUE, it's all about the people taking a leadership role. PUE is one of those strange metrics that you can reduce. The easiest way to reduce your PUE is to put more servers into your data center and switch them on.
Well, I suppose that's what I'm saying. I mean, I think from a PUE perspective, a lot of focus has been on the left-hand side of the equation as opposed to the right-hand side of the equation.
Well, so I can probably add to that a bit, Dan. We talk a lot about PUE, and PUE, I mean, it's a pretty simple equation. It is a good judge of efficiency, but there's a lot more that goes into PUE, right? There's a ton of stuff around the customer environment. There's a ton of stuff around utilization. There's a ton of stuff about being able to meet energy with demand and making that part of it efficient. There's even parts whereas what might be better, a 1.25 that dumps a ton of water into the sewer, or a 1.3 that is all sourced from renewable electricity. So like it is a very good metric, and it's one that I know we are proud of that we do, but it doesn't just stop there. We can say that we design things to something all day, and we do. But until we actually educate and have the conversations with the end users and make sure that we are actually matching our service with their demand, and then also matching that with whatever locality it is, that's where we can really extract the max impact from something like a PUE measure. Like, it's good to design to it, but there's a lot more that happens on the end of that really maximizes our efficiencies.
I suppose my kind of thought is that it's about the workload as well. It's about, you know, understanding what the workload is and understanding the importance of the workload. I mean, there was a question that we're from one of the gentlemen who's listening about blockchain energy consumption, and you know, the people that are doing kind of selfies and various different pieces of IT workloads that are maybe not mission critical. Do you think we're going to get to the point further down the line where there will be some form of restriction or regulation or kind of understanding on the direct relationship between the workload and the power it consumes? Maybe Dave, if you could take that.
Wow, sure, that's easy. I don't know. I'm imagining, you know, how would we do that? So just start off with sort of the, you know, the PUE conversation to me reminds me of, you go to the doctor and they check your blood pressure and they say, oh, your blood pressure is within range, you must be good. But they don't check your sugar or your sodium or your heart rate or whatever. It is a measurement. It is not the only measurement, and it's a measurement that can be manipulated, as those of us that have been around for a very long time. And I think that was a little bit about what Peter was talking about. Also, when we talk about data centers, there are multi-tenant data centers like mine, and maybe even Align and some of the others, where I have a wide range of users in there that have a wide range of needs. So even though ASHRAE has said you can run really, really hot here, maybe they don't. Their workload just doesn't necessitate that. But compliance means they can't go to the cloud. They have to be on an on-prem. So it is complicated. It is a measurement. It's an important measurement, but it's just one of many. As it relates, so then what do we do with it? How do we not have, whether it's through blockchain ledgers or whatever, how do we not have a double spend or have, you know, my kids' cat videos or whatever exploding across the interwebs? I believe it was Dave McCool years ago talked about data gravity. I've written an article about it where so much data gets created that it pulls the apps to it instead of pushing the data to the apps. I don't know. Where I see the industry responding is in new ways of storage. Maybe I hope, you know, as a libertarian, private, free enterprise kind of person, I hope we don't get more regulation in this space, but maybe that's just my perspective. Instead, I think you regulate it through, as a provider, if you're consuming this much space, or you're consuming this much data, this is the surcharge that you have to pay. It will be interesting to see how they do it. Right now, the world's responding with different storage technology and things like that. But it's, I don't know, the more we use things, or the more we create, the cheaper bandwidth is, the more we use, the more we use, the more we want. And I just think that's going to continue in that vein for some time.
I mean, I think on the positive note, I think we're having as an industry, a material impact on other sectors, right?
Sure, absolutely.
And digital transformation and technology. I'm a big believer in this concept called technocentralism, where technology enables different segments to become more responsible.
Well, for example, we're using our influence. So the hyperscales work with us, so with all of us on the call, and we're using our influence to go to the grids and say, to the extent we can, because they're regulated and unregulated grids, but this is the energy we want to consume. This is the type of reliability that we want. Now, some of that's limited by environmental factors, right? You've got to either have the wind or the sun or the hydro or the natural gas or whatever it is to generate. But we are exerting a great amount of pressure and influence, and those industries, whether it's the IT industry that's making devices more efficient, or it's the standards industry that are letting us run our data centers warmer or with less water and different types of cooling, or the grid industry to say, look, if you won't sell us power or this type of power, we'll go over there. I think we're able to bring that to bear on the marketplace, and the marketplace, you know, they want to make money, and so they're going to respond, and they are responding.
Well, I think what you're saying is about transparency, and one of the things that with the people that I've been talking to, it's about how transparent the industry can become. You know,
Mhm.
so if you look at scope 3 emissions and, you know, the cloud, the minute you move, in theory, your IT workloads to the cloud, they become scope 3 emissions. So how transparent the cloud service providers are about their customers' environmental impact is pretty key. And also, you know, how an organization like Microsoft or whoever the web scale provider kind of it works with their supply chain from a colo perspective and enables their supply chain to deliver more kind of um, uh, environmentally sustainable solutions. I think that's also pretty key. So the data center industry as is can only do its bit, and it's reliant on the application users on the left and the grid on the right. So I think that's certainly something that is very key. I'm just going to move on quickly because we've got about 15 minutes left, and then we're going to take some more or ask some more questions from the floor. But one of the things that's changed quite dramatically in the last X number of months is the US administration. And, you know, what do we believe from a political perspective that impact is going to have on the industry? And are we going to kind of see more legislation in the US? What are our thoughts on that? Maybe if we could go to, sorry, I'm going a bit mad here. Elliot, if you could maybe give us your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think with the new administration, I mean, it's almost a daily discussion that we hear about money coming down the pipe, all these funds being promoted for sustainability and reducing emissions. I saw even this morning there's announcements and conversations happening. So I think as these funds are released and, as I was mentioned earlier, we have to drive sustainability from the top down. That's not just within our companies, from the CEO down, that's from the administration, from the president down. This has to be drove by the administration. So as funds are released and everybody gets on board, we start releasing electric automobiles. We start driving down the price of solar panels. I think it's going to have a big impact over the next couple years. It's going to give operators such as Bluebird and others on the call to maybe do some of their own renewable energy sources, such as solar arrays. We've looked into that in the past, and the price points are a little high right now. But I think over the next couple of years, with the extra money in the economy, specifically for sustainability, we're going to see those price points come down, and we're going to be able to start doing some of this on our own. And not just the hyperscalers, but everybody on this call will be able to start driving the sustainability initiative more so themselves.
Yeah, so I think Europe's slightly ahead of the US in terms of its plans from a legislative perspective around this area. And we saw the zero carbon initiative on the PAC that was made by data center operators predominantly driven from Europe. I know there were a lot of US operators as part of that. Do you see that kind of translating to North America? And do you see like the operators, do you see you guys, the operators on the phone, kind of making a similar pact over the course of the coming years? Maybe Michael, David, have you got any thoughts on that?
Certainly do. I mean, I think that we're already seeing leadership steps taken in the industry by some big and serious providers and for customers of ours, and certainly support and want to take part in that. So I think there has been a dramatic improvement in the efficiency and thus the sustainability over the past 5, 10, 15 years. And I think there's going to be some pretty exciting technological advances in the near term that are going to drive that next wave of sustainability. So I think it's going to be an industry supported phenomena, politics, no politics. I think the industry is going to take us there. And we're already looking to make those steps now. So I think it's going to be a really exciting time over the next 4 or 5 years as some of these leading edge technologies become more of a commonplace within the industry.
And what about you, David? What do you think? I know that QTS has got a strong mission statement around sustainability. How is that process going through you? Is that something that you see being an industry-wide commitment in North America?
Yeah, for sure. In fact, I think the groundswell is here to Michael's point is irrespective of politics. It wouldn't matter who the administration is here in the U.S. now, or I can't even see it in the next decade. Maybe some would offer incentives, but the biggest buyers in the world are already saying, look, if you want to do business with us, you have to have a plan. And so organizations like those of us here on this call, we not only set goals, but we create plans and roadmaps and we commit. So you're talking about Microsoft, who's probably the boldest in this space, but there are a number of others that are saying, here's not just our goal, but here's how you're going to measure us. And then here's how we're going to influence our supply chain, our customers, all of the folks around us in a positive way. I was just talking to the director of sustainability the other day at Salesforce, and how in their culture, not just from within the worker bees, from the CEO on down. And so I think that there is for a wide variety of reasons, it's not just an activist reason, but for economic reasons, for human flourishing reasons, for a wide variety of reasons, whatever the agenda is, industry, organizations like ours, our CEO, when we're talking about chief sustainability officer, our CEO is playing that role today, but we have a VP in that role right now. And at some point, just like when we went from IT and you didn't have CIOs and CTOs until later, as that matured, in the same way, that will be the same for our industry and organizations like ours. So we're all in on, and we state the goals, we're measuring against the goals. And I think in addition to that, beyond just the energy and the waste that we're talking about, the social goals. How do you work with your communities, whether it's your continent, your local community, the global community? What are you doing in a meaningful way to partner with organizations to help them reduce their environmental impact? I think that all of that.
So just hold that thought. I just want to pick up on your point earlier to Peter. I think we all agree that you need to get the top level support for sustainability to make that work. Can you talk to us about the importance of the board and buy-in at C-level leadership as it relates to sustainability? And what are you seeing from that side of things?
Totally. That's the answer, I'm afraid. It's at top level. We've got to do something with this. 20 million people. I kicked off by saying, the first Earth Day event, there was 20 million people took to the streets in the US. That was 10% of the population. So it was a real thing. But I don't think legislation is the answer. This is a case of, do what I tell you or do what I do. So you've got to follow the leaders. They have to show, real leadership. And I'm afraid, one of the easiest ways to improve the situation is to use less. We have to learn to use less of whatever we do. Use less power, use less water, whatever it is. I mean, a very quick analogy. I lived in Nigeria 40 years ago, and there wasn't any water, and we only had power. I was building a data center. We didn't have much water, and we only had power for about 8 hours a day. So you learn to use whatever you had, very, very, very sparingly. And not a story I should be sharing, but as there's only the 4 of you here, he says, even then, when there was no water, when I used to go to have a pee, my wife would follow me, and we'd use the same water. When we had a bath, we'd take the water out of the bath and we'd put it in the toilet. Now, I'm not advocating we do all that now, but it is a behavioral thing here. We have to think about, before we do things, let's think about what damage we might be doing to the environment. And I'm not sure, and I'm not having a pop at you, Elliot, I'm not sure that buying carbon credits is really the answer. It gets you out of something, but it isn't the real answer. The real answer is to only use real renewable to whatever you're doing. Think about sustainability. Am I really helping the environment by doing what I'm doing, even if I just switch the light off when I leave the office?
Consumption issue, isn't it, Peter? Let me let Elliot maybe talk to us about the Bluebird data center footprint and your renewable energy design. Maybe that would give us a good opportunity to cover that off.
Yeah, sure. So we currently have a couple data centers. We have the Bluebird Underground Data Center in Springfield, Missouri. It's right around 80,000 square foot facility. And then we have the Bluebird Quad Cities Data Center in Bettendorf, Iowa. And that's just under 60,000 square foot. So it's, a couple large data centers. They're unique due to the fact that they sit directly on the Bluebird network's fiber infrastructure. So it really allows us to provide customers with a needing fiber connectivity, internet services, and a data center solution. It's all this one big bundle. So that's kind of our footprint. As far as the data center renewable energy design, it consists of a few things. So I had mentioned before, supplying our facilities with a mix of traditional and renewable energy. That's happening today. Utilities provide that. And in many cases, if we reach out, any of us could reach out to our utility provider and find out what that mix is right now. Another one is driving down the data center's energy usage by using those energy efficient items as in our infrastructure, right? Replacing the 15 or 20-year-old UPS systems with something that's newer and up to date that doesn't lose that energy when it converts AC to DC and into the batteries. There's a huge loss in those older systems. So upgrading those type of systems is going to save you a massive amount of energy. I know we talked about PUE earlier, trying to drive it down. PUE is it's a good KPI for us in some of our data center at Springfield Underground, because some of our data center rooms, our data centers compartmentalized. If our room is completely filled up and populated with customers and servers and machines, we can manipulate the cooling and moving around vents, and we can see our PUE adjust, not by adding more equipment or adding servers, but maybe by lowering the ceiling height so we have a smaller space to cool. So we're looking at doing stuff like that in order to bring that PUE down. And we can see those results through the PUE, not by adding equipment, but because the room's already filled up. It's already maxed out. So we can see that manipulation. So
I get that. I think so. Listen, we're going to move on because I want to take a few questions from the audience. I just want to end this bit with Richard, and he's kind of made a few comments around, or has passed me some notes around kind of the positive impact that green ITAD efforts can have, and I would tend to believe, kind of follow his thought process as a significant amount of the embedded carbon is in the IT assets. Maybe Richard, if you could just talk us through your thoughts around those things just very quickly, that'd be helpful.
Do you mean like in relation to the standards that we follow, or
just that more companies are requiring that they're certified for compliant recycling, more companies tracking the impact that recycling efforts have on reducing greenhouse gases and diverting toxic materials, more companies with sustainability officers, those thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, we absolutely are seeing more, I think in the United States, more companies paying attention, being aware of the standards that are out there. The EPA recognizes two different standards. There's E-Stewards and R2, and both have guidelines regarding a no landfill policy. And there's things like we have to follow and that we get audited for: chain of custody, safety, hazardous waste, things not getting exported to poor countries. So I do think that there's companies have had a much greater awareness. It hasn't really been so much mandated by the government, but I think a corporate awareness as the years go on that this is the responsible thing to do. That's just what I've seen, and that when we're signing, I work a lot on contracts, and we're signing contracts, not only will make sure that we have these certifications, but that we will maintain these certifications. Okay,
cool. So listen, we're going to go on to some questions from the audience. We've had a couple that have been put into the chat. One deals with kind of stranded capacity and rising densities. And I know the density of the racks is a big issue, but how are we dealing with this over subscription, stranded capacity. And maybe Michael, if you've got any thoughts on that in terms of the increasing workload size from a power consumption perspective and through AI and machine learning, and how you right size your assets for your customers' requirements.
Yes, certainly. So the comment was made earlier about use less. And so density inherently means that you're doing more with less. So density is a huge driver for sustainability. It's a huge driver for efficiency. And so one of the things that we're quite proud of is when we deploy our product, deploy for our customers, we're not just thinking about what they need right now. We're thinking about what they might need in 3, 5, 7, 10 years. And so from a sustainability standpoint, it's important for us to allow our customers to expand within our footprint, within their current space, to allow them to, again, do more with less or do more with the same. And so that's a big way to aid in efficiency, aid in sustainability, and even aid in helping customers solve this digital acceleration, which in and of itself creates some sort of uncertainty within the modeling, use modeling, and all of that. And so being able to help drive that up within the same footprints is going to be a huge leg up for our industry.
Are you seeing a lot of immersion cooling? Are you seeing a lot of kind of the move towards immersion as a preferred, more efficient cooling method?
We are seeing it, yes. Are we seeing it at scale or anywhere near a majority of what we deploy? No, but we are seeing it, and we are seeing customers that have a highly specialized, highly high load, figure that one out, work environment that have deployed to that. And it's pretty exciting to see it go in, because you can really see what the next wave of this technology can look like and what it can mean from utilization of infrastructure. It's very exciting.
And are you future-proofing your sites in terms of the way you're building them to kind of deal with more immersive cooling further down the line? Is that in your design kind of planning?
Absolutely. So one, we do look to plan for growing density. So when we build, and like you said, number of 300 watts a foot, right? So if that's what someone wants to buy now, we're not looking to deploy to that. We're looking to deploy to a 1.5 or 2 times that, to be able to solution that product for the long run. And also developing infrastructure that does enable different means of delivering cooling to the rack. So the liquid cooling versus high density air systems. We want to make sure that our facilities are adaptive to any of those technologies, not just now, but like I said, 5, 7, 10 years from now.
That's interesting.
It's a dance. It's a very intricate dance of how to do that and maintain a competitive position day one. So it's something we're definitely very proud of.
So one of my questions for you, and I suppose it's more focused on the operators that are on the call, is, we're seeing a significant growth in, well, we've been seeing it, and I think it's starting to happen, growth in edge capacity. And I've been working with a number of operators that are building specialist edge modules for their clients' requirements. And I think one of the pieces of research that I saw was saying that something like within the next 10 years, 9 out of 10 pieces of data won't even make it to the data center. It's all going to happen at the edge. What are our thoughts on that in terms of what you're seeing? Maybe David, if you could just cover that off for us quickly.
Sure. So I talk to people all the time about what's the edge and where's the edge. And probably the definition that I love the most is it's where the request is served. So a request is made, the answer is given, and then it goes back to whatever made the request. So the conundrum is, how do we push data centers? What role will they play? What size will they be further out from major metropolitan areas? It's kind of what everybody means when they talk about the edge. Right now in our data centers, for example, we're within 2 milliseconds of 90% of the United States population. And so we're the edge in Atlanta, even though I'm in downtown Atlanta or outside of Atlanta or Chicago or Dallas or New York or whatever. And so as we in our data centers on average are probably around the 300,000 to 500,000 square feet, with several of them over 1 million square feet. So would I drop that right now in Des Moines, Iowa? Probably not. So when we look at that, when we or all organizations are looking at where are they going to deploy data centers, and to your point earlier about at some point in the future, the packet's not even going to make it to a data center because it's going to be processed on the device. Perhaps would be true, but data mining, data analytics, all of these things, big machine learning, at least for the next decade, 15 years. And this isn't my opinion, this is just talking to scientists at the major research firms. We had the CEO for Accenture on the other day as we're talking through these things. And I think the edge question of what that data center looks like and what role it's going to be playing within the latency. I mean, does it make more sense if I can get a 2 millisecond service out of Chicago to build the data center 100 miles closer in Peoria and consume all those materials? I mean, that's what we're all trying to solve.
I think it's very different in the US, right? I think the market in the US from an edge perspective is certainly different to Europe.
In what way, in your experience, in what way?
I don't think you've got the same issues from a GDPR perspective. I think the fiber routes are, probably better in North America, but but in some of the regions that we're working on from a European perspective, there's certainly a thought process that a significant amount of the data will be happening, whether it's at the mobile mast or whether it's with the 5G deployment, and the backhaul to the data center will be somewhat more limited than it is today. That's certainly the kind of trends that I'm hearing from the people that I'm talking to. I don't know, Peter, do you have any comments on that?
I don't really, Dan. No, I'm not on that particular issue. I don't. But if I can just have one quick question for the others, one thing that's burning a hole in my head here is I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, that electricity from true renewable sources, let's say nuclear or solar or water, is more expensive than electricity produced from fossil fuel. I just wondered how the other guys on the panel deal with this, cost versus conscience conundrum.
And maybe Michael, if you could take that.
Yes. So I think I made the comment earlier that one of the things that I think that our industry is doing that is probably a little understated is the investment in the renewable industries that these green purchases and stuff create. And so I think there's actually going to be, I think it helps from a gap perspective to help build up an industry, mature an industry, make it more mainstream, make it more widely available from a cost standpoint. So I don't know that we look at it necessarily like that day one. I think we're in this for the long game, and the more that we work and contribute to that renewable energy market, the better it's going to be situated to become mainstream in the not too distant future. So that's kind of how I look at it personally.
Is it significant? Is that the case that renewable power is significantly more expensive than non-renewable power?
I don't personally have a dollar per kilowatt hour rate on hand, but there's many things that go into that transmission, location, a bunch of elements that I don't know that it's just a black and white question.
Because I would have thought, Peter, in Europe it's cheaper, isn't it? Isn't that why there's so much capacity going to places like Norway? If you look at the power in Canada, in Montreal, which is a big hydropower market, it's got the cheapest power in North America. I don't know where did you get that?
It was it's on the radio this morning because it's Earth Day and there's all sorts of programs going on, and I was driving down the road and this was the discussion going on that do people pay for what we have over here? We have all these people that can do comparisons on electricity prices, right? And they were saying that certain companies are really green and certain companies are not, and they have this bronze to gold rating. And a lot of the bronze companies look or a lot of the silver companies, they look green, but they buy carbon credits. So they're not really doing the right thing. But they were saying that the problem is that anybody that produces 100% renewable, all their electricity prices are more expensive. That may just apply to the UK, I'm not sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's about the import, how much of your power is imported versus self-generated. I think definitely from a European perspective, most of the locations that I've been working with that have got high proportion of renewable power, with the exception of maybe France, are lower than the locations that don't.
So Dan, my Dallas data center is, I think, 100% buying its power from the wind farms in the Midwest, and it is not, according to my Travis Wright, my VP who's of sustainability at QTS, it is not more expensive than the fossil fuel in that area based upon its geographic situation. But something Peter said earlier, one, I love his perspective. I would just say, somebody said this once to me, look, we know what paradise looks like. Paradise looks like, in this context, 100% renewable. We have more available than we're consuming. We're not consumer-driven economy. But between now and then, we've got to eat on our way to paradise. So whether that's buying carbon credits, whether that's investing in green, whatever it takes, we don't want to throw up our hands and say, we can't do anything because that's harder or a little bit more expensive. We need to do something on the way. And I think that as long as industry is doing that, they're measuring it and being held accountable, we will eventually get to paradise.
David, I think with those
Totally
very inspiring closing words, I'd like to thank all the panelists for taking the time to speak with us today. I thank Evolve for setting this up, and the guys that are on the call, thank you for attending as well. If you haven't made it, and you're watching this on demand, then I hope you enjoy it too. So thanks very much.